All right, well, good morning, folks. For those of you who might not have met yet, or I didn't have the class, my name is Nick Stump. And I just wanted to start off by echoing Professor Miller and Professor Pavio's thanks to you all for coming out this morning. Really do hope that we are adding some niche and helpful value to you all as you are thinking about your summer jobs. And, again, beyond our programming today, you know where we live, right? We're all in the library, so feel to reach out after this program about any specific questions or about any specific types of research that you think we need to do this summer. And certainly feel free to contact us this summer if you have any research questions. Every summer, a number of my students end up calling me at least once a week, right, if they have research-heavy positions. It's literally what we're here for, right? So we encourage you to do so. So I will indeed be talking about Bloomberg law, and the reason why we're dedicating an entire session to Bloomberg is because we don't cover it in the standardized Introduction to Legal Research curriculum, right? It's only 1 credit hour, so we have to make some cuts. But the database really does have some helpful tools and resources for law students, particularly law students when they're at their summer employment. So we did want to swing back and cover it in somewhat of a comprehensive sense today in this Prep to Practice program. And also, we cover Bloomberg law extensively in advanced legal research. So as you start thinking about your schedules going forward, think about us. We normally offer advanced legal research in the spring semester, so we're teaching it right now. Right? This is just a taste of comprehensive Bloomberg law that we, again, cover in our upper level courses. So, sort of a 10,000-foot view of Bloomberg law. Does anyone know the difference between West and Lexis on the one hand and Bloomberg law on the other?
Isn't Bloomberg's primarily a business organization?
Precisely. So West and Lexis are our general legal research databases. They have been around forever, in one incarnation or another, right? Decades and decades. What this means is it doesn't matter what type of research you're doing, right? Family law, criminal law, tax law, corporate law. You're going to be able to do it on West and Lexis, right? You're going to have comprehensive secondary sources. You're going to have comprehensive primary sources with annotations and citator treatment and so forth. And so they're great, right? There are general legal research databases. Bloomberg law is newer. It was launched in 2010. And while we generally think of Bloomberg law as a general legal research database, and certainly it talks about itself as a general legal research database, really it is more of a specialized database in focusing on business and transactional areas of law. And really when it comes to business and transactional areas of law, Bloomberg is the best hands down, right? That was the whole business model, the whole idea of launching Bloomberg law. It wasn't something that West and Lexis did particularly well, right? It was more of a litigator tool, right? Both West and Lexis in the beginning. Although, since Bloomberg law was launched, West and Lexis have made some strides to incorporate transactional specific resources and business specific resources, which I'll talk about in my breakout section. I should add at the beginning that one of the reasons why Bloomberg law is such a phenomenal database for these specific subject areas is because it has B&A resources, right? B&A resources, hands down, are the best legal materials when it comes to both secondary sources like the portfolios and the manuals I'll be talking about, and also B&A editorial content like on case law, right? So you'll hear me reference B&A throughout my remarks, right, within Bloomberg law, and just think, right, exceptional materials. West and Lexis's comparable materials are pretty good, but again, they don't come close to what B&A has to offer. And essentially that's what Bloomberg, the parent company, did. They purchased B&A, right, that publishing company, incorporated it into Bloomberg law as they're constructing the database in the first place, and that was a selling point, right, to business-focused attorneys and transactional attorneys. specifically. So at the sort of 10,000 foot view level, does that make sense, right? The basic distinction of Bloomberg law versus the other two. And the only other thing is Bloomberg law has a number of specialized tools, such as PACER that I'm going to be talking about, that aren't necessarily business or transactional law specific, but are super helpful for law students and for your summer jobs. So we'll also be talking about those tools that are available on Bloomberg that certainly aren't on West or Lexis. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at Bloomberg law. So this is Bloomberg Law's main page, and while it resembles West and Lexis, the interface design is sort of different in that most of the helpful content isn't actually available on the main screen. You have to go through Browse on the top left. So typically when I'm using Bloomberg, I log in and click Browse right away, right, to find what it is I'm looking for. And so if you select Browse on the top left, and then select Practice Centers, you will see more specifically the areas of law that Bloomberg law specializes in, right? And these are our business and transactional areas of law. So they include, notably, banking and finance, corporate law, health, international trade, labor and employment law, securities law, and also IP law, right? Like patents and so forth. So these are our general business and transactional areas of law. And again, Bloomberg law has the best content, especially in terms of secondary sources, hands down on these subject areas, right? So if you're an attorney and you're mostly doing tax law, right, as another example, and you have access to Bloomberg law, you always use Bloomberg law's tax secondary sources like the portfolios and manuals because they are much better, again, than West and Lexis. And again, it's funny, we talk about one breakout session, right? But as soon as Bloomberg law launched in 2010, West and Lexis scrambled to create subcenters that focus on these areas of law as well. And they've made a lot of strides in the past decade, but it's just what Bloomberg law excels at. So let's go ahead and put a pin in our primary sources and secondary sources in a general sense. We'll circle back to those at the end of my remarks. But what I wanted to do really first is talk about those special tools and resources that Bloomberg has that West and Lexis don't have, like PACER, because that's typically why law students are using Bloomberg law, like in practice, over the summer. All right, so we'll talk about these special tools again, and then circle back to our general secondary sources and law in a general sense on Bloomberg. So the special sources that I want to talk about are PACER, also Edgar, the Business Intelligence Center, and a tool called Transactional Precedence, which is a clause and documents library. So let's go ahead and start with PACER. So does anyone know what PACER is? No?
I've heard about it, but I can't remember what the acronym
Stands
stands for.
You know what it does?
I think I went to the session that you did a couple weeks ago on PACER, and it was looking at like judges, I think, and lawyers, or it was research. I'm not really sure.
It was part of that talk, yeah, it was. So PACER is indeed an acronym, and it stands for Public Access to Court Electronic Records, an extremely important resource, right? Beyond West or Lexis or FastCase, right? A low-cost legal research database. PACER is one of those resources that firms tend to subscribe to separately because it is so important because it does have materials that aren't on West or Lexis. So essentially, PACER is a website. It's not a database, and it contains court filings associated with a case, right? So if you have a federal case, you're interested in not just the decision, right, but also the complaint and the answer, the motions, the briefs, the court orders, and so on and so forth. Those materials generally aren't on West or Lexis. They are available on Pacer. There is comprehensive coverage of federal court filings on Pacer. There's only spotty coverage of state filings, right? At best, the bigger states like New York or California are going to have some state level filings. West Virginia, not so much, right? So we generally think of it as a website that is a repository for federal court filings. The problem is it's fee-based, right? You just can't go to Pacer and pull up a complaint associated with the case. You have to pay as you go. Now, there's been a lot written about Pacer. I think there was a New York Times article out just a few weeks ago saying how this ought to be free to the public. We live in a democracy, right? These things should be behind paywalls, right? These important public documents. But there it is, right? It is fee-based. That's why right, a lot of law firms subscribe to it. Bloomberg Law has an agreement with Pacer. Pacer is embedded in Bloomberg Law, right? So this is probably the top reason why law students use Bloomberg is because they can access Pacer for free within Bloomberg Law. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's fantastic. So what typically happens is you're doing research and you find a case, right? So here I'm using Westlaw, and I found a decision from the United States District Court for the Northern District of West Virginia, so it's a federal case. It's Atkins v. O'Brien. You're like, fantastic, this is great, right? This is helpful. However, I want to see all the court filings that were associated with the case. Again, something like a complaint or an answer, the briefs that were filed, right? You want to see the arguments that the two sides put together. Right? You can steal those arguments. That's a common reason why practitioners want to look up materials like that, so they're not reinventing the wheel, right, in terms of reasoning associated with an area of law. Well, on West or Lexis, you might have a tab like you see on Westlaw here for filings. It says Filings 8. If you click that, at best, you normally just see an overview of some of the filings that were associated with it, and you're not able to retrieve and view the full text, right? So you're not going to get the filings on West or Lexis for a federal case, but what you do is you grab your basic information from your case from West or Lexis, you go to Bloomberg Law, and you go to Pacer as embedded in Bloomberg Law, and you can pull it up. Make sense? Really common question. Students in clinic are always asking us about this, and students over the summer are as well. Now you can grab different sorts of information. I've been using it, Pacer as embedded in Bloomberg Law for a long time. So what I normally do is I make a note of the jurisdiction, again, Northern District of West Virginia, and I get what's called the docket number from the case, right? Which is always going to be a number just beneath the caption, right? So here's 214-CD36, right? Sometimes you can copy paste this, sometimes you have to write it out again because both Pacer and Bloomberg Law can be a little bit cranky about that sort of thing. So typically, if I grab the docket number and make a note of the court, I can pull up the full court docket on Pacer as is available in Bloomberg Law and get those documents. Right? So to get to Pacer as is available on Bloomberg, unfortunately, it just doesn't say Pacer, although that would be more straightforward. Instead, you're going to want to go to Dockets, which is on the main page. Okay? Then you're going to have an automated form that pops up, just like basically everything on Bloomberg Law. And here's where you put in your basic information. For courts, you're going to put down the court you're in. So it's West Virginia, Northern District. Right, click it. Now it's added. And then you're going to want to go to docket number. And I copy paste it by docket number in. We'll see if it works. Again, sometimes it can be a little bit cranky. Oh, and it worked. Pleasantly surprised. So here we see Atkins v. O'Brien, docket number, etc. Right, so it's pulling this from Pacer. We pull up the docket information for Atkins v. O'Brien. And there we have it. Right? Scroll down. You'll see all of the filings in chronological order. that the two parties filed any court orders, right, issued by the judge. In this instance, it started not with a complaint and an answer, but with a petition for a writ of habeas corpus. So that's our first document, chronological order. And again, you do get the full text, the PDF scans. So it's going to say either view or request. If it says view, that means someone has already requested it on Bloomberg and it reached out to Pacer and got it. If it says request, you have to click request and see if it will get it from Pacer. In my experience, 90–95% of the time, it will successfully retrieve the document from Pacer. Maybe 1 in 10 times it just says no, and you're out of luck. Okay.
And does it do it all automatically like the way you requested?
I'll show you. Yep. So first I'll show you the view. Right, so again, someone has already requested this. I should actually say, before you even try it, clicking on these, you want to go to the top and do update docket here. That will update everything that's already there, right? It's not already displaying. Here I click update docket. On Bloomberg with an academic subscription, you're always going to see little notices like this saying, hey, you have a collection fee. Sometimes it says waive, sometimes it lists the price. Doesn't matter with your academic subscription, it's always free. So you could ignore these pop-up messages. So I click accept. All right, my docket is updated, right? It's had no changes, so we're good to go. All right, so to view this document, again, the petition for the writ of habeas corpus, I'll select view. 8 pages, right? That means that's the actual full text of the writ, so I'll click 1. And there we have it. Right? The full text actual PDF. It's not HTML or anything like that, which is also excellent, right? Because these are always more authoritative than something reproduced in HTML. So for request, all you do is just click request, right? Again, you're going to get a pop-up message. It might list a price, it might say waived. Again, as an academic user, it doesn't matter. Click accept. Right, it gives you a little message. Basically, it's going to process your request, and once it lets you know whether it's obtainable or not, you get a pop-up message. And here it says it has been obtained, so it will be available on your Dockets request page. Right. Yeah, Bloomberg tends to operate with pop-ups generally. It's sort of this thing.
If you were to press update docket now, would it save you?
Yes, precisely. You got it. Okay. That makes sense. See how helpful this is, right? Since those materials aren't on lessons like this. And oftentimes your supervisor, rather than you like working backwards to find a brief to steal arguments, which happens a lot, sometimes the supervisor will just say, hey, try and track down the complaint or answer or whatever you can, right? So your task is just to find, whatever documents are available. Okay, so the next resource I want to talk about is called Edgar. It's actually a little bit more obscure than Pacer. It's also an acronym. So does anyone know what Edgar is, what it stands for? Or any guesses?
Okay.
Oh, that's right.
Is it docket?
It's that's the first one. I actually forget this one all the time. It's the electronic data gathering, analysis, and retrieval system. This one, it's a little less intuitive than what's going on with Pacer. So essentially, this is another repository of filings, but these are filings that the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, asked for by law from publicly traded companies, right? To essentially keep track of what's going on with their finances, right? To make sure that everything is above board legally, right? So publicly traded companies are filing information all the time with SEC on a rolling basis. For instance, if you have a change in beneficial ownership of your stock, right? As soon as that happens, you have to file it with the SEC. That's the example we're going to look at today. But there are a ton of other type filings that you might imagine that are required under SEC law, and they all get, these are public documents as well, right? So they all get gathered together within Edgar, which is, in this instance, a free repository of these SEC filings. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, unlike Pacer, Edgar is actually free. You can go to the Edgar page on the SEC website and do a keyword search within it. The search functionality has come a long way on the Edgar website, even just since I've been in the profession. It was unusable like a half decade ago, but now it's not bad. Still though, if you're doing a lot of Edgar type research, if you're a transactional attorney especially, or a business attorney, and you have access to Bloomberg Law, you always use Edgar as is available on Bloomberg because it does have advanced search functionality, right? It's much easier to find the documents that you're looking for. And I mean, if you're doing Edgar search as a transactional attorney, it's normally because it's some sort of due diligence research, right? You want to see what's going on with the financials of a company, if they're maybe involved in a merger or something like that. And also, as we'll see, both these Pacer filings and the Edgar filings undergird a lot of the bigger systems like the Business Intelligence Center and Bloomberg Law, right? They form the data that drives the system. That's why I'm starting with these. Does that make sense? Okay. So to access Edgar on Bloomberg Law, it's going to be browse again. For some reason, you have no idea why they put everything in the top left. And then it's going to be, go back to all content, the Transactional Intelligence Center. Okay? And then under SEC filings, you're going to have advanced Edgar search, right? It's the best way to search for filings within Edgar. So let's look for one specific type of Edgar form. It's called a Form 4. These do involve changes in beneficial ownership. Edgar Form 4. So there's a ton, there's a ton of different SEC type forms. This is one of the most common because there's always changes in ownership. So here we have Edgar Form 4. And let's say you're researching a specific company, Duke Energy. So we'll just start typing Duke Energy. There's Duke Energy Corp. Right? So we're searching for all of the Form 4s, the folks in Duke Energy have been filing. Search. And here we see the latest one, which was just on March 15th. Right? So again, these are rolling. They happen all the time. We'll click in here. And here again, we get the actual form, right? Statement on changes in beneficial ownership by a specific person, right? So what happens from Duke Energy. And you can see where it got, right, from the SEC. And again, it is these Edgar filings and also the Pacer filings that undergird a lot of the systems I'm about to talk about. So sometimes you're doing research because you're asked to, right, to find Edgar filings or Pacer information like a complaint. But oftentimes you're using the more sophisticated systems, again, and these are driving those. So any questions about Edgar? All right, so let's look at that Business Intelligence Center. So the Business Intelligence Center, again, is a tool that tends to get used a lot by law students and in different ways. At the talk I did a few weeks ago, it was how you can use the Business Intelligence Center to look up judges and to look up law firms and find a lot of information about them. Right, so when you're interviewing in the first place, right, you can look up firms and then companies and legal professionals and learn about them. But again, once you're practicing in the business or transactional areas, then you can use the Business Intelligence Center to figure out like the financials of a company, right? So again, it's part of a due diligence research process to see where they stand, right, before like a merger happens, right? That sort of thing. So you can look up companies, and again, you can look up legal professionals and the notable persons in the general sense on the Business Intelligence Center. That's why it has that name, right? Business Intelligence. So to access it, it's going to be browse once again. And rather than the Transactional Intelligence Center, we'll do the Business Intelligence Center. Right? So if you wanted to look up judges or lawyers or notable persons, you can go to the people search. But if you want to look up companies, like law firms, right, or any publicly traded company or larger private companies, that's going to be company lookup. So that's what we'll do. So once again, let's look up the profile for Duke. Duke Energy Corp. US. So here we have a pretty comprehensive profile on what is going on with this publicly traded company. Again, a fantastic resource, right, for transactional attorneys. I have a friend who is a transactional attorney at a top 100 firm in California, and he's using this all the time whenever he's doing his due diligence research. So you're going to get an overview on the company. Duke Energy Corporation is an energy company located primarily in the Americas that owns an integrated network of energy assets, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to get overview information like where it's incorporated, Delaware, surprise, surprise, how many employees it has, just over 30,000, et cetera. And then you're going to get more detailed information like its financials. And this, this is also going to be helpful for litigators, right? If you're thinking about who to sue, for instance, or thinking about deep pockets for a large corporation, right? Financials is the place to go. So we'll click in there for Duke. And here we see things, most recently, December 2018. We see their financials in terms of revenue, operating income, pre-tax income, right, et cetera, et cetera. Note that it says for revenue around 24,000. Of course, that's not right. All these numbers are in millions of dollars, right? They're just not going to include all those zeros on a chart like this. And again, this information, they get it in different ways. There's like a classic Bloomberg terminal that Bloomberg provided before Bloomberg had a lot of company information. But Edgar filings is a big way, right, that they get these numbers. So Edgar undergirds a lot of the financial information. You're also going to see things like company hierarchy, and I won't click into this one, right? Lets you know who Duke's subsidiaries are, or its affiliates. And I've talked to some older transactional attorneys who love this feature, because before this existed, more junior transactional attorneys would be in a room with like sticky notes, trying to figure out all the corporate structure, which again, right, can be important if you're talking about something like merging two companies, making sure everything's above board. And one of them talked about it like a yarn board, like you see in Homeland, where you're trying to figure out a conspiracy. That's what attorneys had to do, right? Transactional attorneys. But now you can click something like company hierarchy, and a whole list of subsidiaries, list of affiliates, and so forth. I love the yarn board. So then Pacer also drives aspects of these company profiles, right? That's going to be litigation analytics, right? So you're going to see things like all the law firms that are involved in the litigation on both sides, in the litigation that Duke has been involved in. I should say mostly the federal litigation, because this is being driven by Pacer. So this isn't everything, right? This is just what Pacer has. So you're not going to get state litigation. You're also going to get the cases that Duke has been involved in, Duke Energy, by legal category. So I'll show you that. So I'll launch the analytics for case law. I'll do case type. So of the information that Bloomberg has from Pacer, we have 376 cases, federal litigation. You see that 10.9% has been environmental, I thought it would be higher actually, 9.3% employment, and so on and so forth. So let's click environmental. So the environmental litigation that Duke has been involved in. You see that there's 41 cases. If you scroll down, we actually have those cases listed as pulled from Pacer. Right? So any questions about the Business Intelligence Center? You see how it's helpful? Yeah. Probably that's the second most common question that we get about Bloomberg is how to look up a judge or something, right? The students might be doing that. So as a last tool, and I should wrap things up, that I'll discuss before just briefly talking about primary and secondary sources in a general sense, is transactional precedence. I'll go back to the Bloomberg main screen. Transactional precedence is a terrible name. We're always talking about how it's terrible because it's not really descriptive. Transactional precedence is just a repository of transactional model forms. So it's a repository of contracts, it's a repository of articles of incorporation, right? All of the main sorts of transactional documents that transactional attorneys are asked to draft. Also as a repository of clauses, right? So, you know, there are millions of joint and several liability clauses, for instance, in different contexts. And transactional attorneys don't reinvent the wheel. If you're asked to draft articles of incorporation in the context of a renewable energy company, you don't get a chalkboard and start writing it out. You look for folks who've already done it, and you work backwards from those examples. Typically, it might be from another jurisdiction, so you have to make sure the law is right. You have to add the specific facts from your client, right? Professor Wilson calls this Frankensteining sometimes because they're putting all these different things together and creating the whole. And transactional precedents that are in Bloomberg law get used a lot, again, by law students who are taking transactional type classes like with Professor Wilson or Professor Voskeren, right? So we do guest lectures on this for those classes. So here, let's look for a model articles of incorporation. Corporate charter is an article, right? This is just the document they have to draft whenever you're starting an entity. So articles of incorporation. Let's look for articles of incorporation in a renewable energy context. Okay. So here we see articles of incorporation from an actual renewable energy company, Green Plains Renewable Energy Incorporated. Look into that. And there we see their actual articles of incorporation, right? That again, you can use as a starting place if you're tasked with drafting something like this for a renewable company. Very carefully, right? You pick and choose what might be helpful. You check the law of your jurisdiction, right? You make sure your client's needs are in there. And so you always have to be careful if you're using a document. Where do you think Bloomberg law gets these? Any guesses? It's one of the resources I already talked about. Edgar, right? Because these are filings often, right? So you'll see over here 10Q. It's a type of Edgar filing. Okay, so Bloomberg law is pretty smart, right? They're leveraging resources to build these helpful analytics and systems. So just as a final point, to zoom out and talk about secondary sources and primary sources on Bloomberg. Primary resources are available, both federal and state, on Bloomberg law, but they just don't have all the comprehensive bells and whistles that West and Lexis do. Right? So you can pull up a federal statute on Bloomberg. You will get citator treatment. The citator is called B-Cite on Bloomberg law, but you're not going to get all those helpful annotations like interpretive cases and regulations promulgated in accordance with your statute. They're human curated, like on West and Lexis. Instead, you're going to get a sampling of interpretive cases or a sampling of regs or secondary sources that machine learning have pulled, right? So anytime you're doing general legal research, like on family law or criminal law, you would never use Bloomberg. You would use West or Lexis, right? Because that's what West or Lexis excels at. Same thing with case law. Many cases don't have headnotes, like on West or Lexis, right? Although the cases that are in Bloomberg law specialty areas, right, tax, securities, labor and employment securities, will have headnotes. And they'll have DNA authored headnotes, so they're outstanding, right? Those are the human curators and authors at DNA that are writing those. So again, if you are researching Bloomberg law specialty areas, then you will have things like helpful headnotes, and you will have, again, citator treatment, which is comparable to West or Lexis. And of course, you won't have citator treatment on a free resource like Google or the Cornell Legal Information Institute. Last point, those secondary sources I was talking about, authored by DNA. Again, if you go to Browse, if you go to secondary sources, here we will see the B&A portfolios, B&A manuals. frankly, there's a lot of business and transactional attorneys who subscribe to Bloomberg, and all they do is use the B&A portfolios. The B&A portfolios are the best secondary sources, hands down, on these areas of law, like tax, like securities. They're not written by B&A folks. They're outsourced to experts in the field and academics, and they write them. So Professor Wilson, for instance, has written a tax portfolio, and that's how big of a deal it is. And so the portfolios are just gold, right, for business and transactional attorneys. Hard to overstate their importance. B&A manuals are written by the actual B&A editors, and they're also very good, but they're overviews, right, where you really get the intricacies of the law that a practitioner would be interested in through the portfolios. The very last point is current awareness resources on Bloomberg Law that Professor Miller talked a bit about. So again, if you do browse, you go to news, and then do Bloomberg Law News. In fact, here you see news from the Bloomberg terminal, if those still exist. They're actually, actual physical terminals that provide corporate news information. But if you go to Bloomberg Law News, you'll see what used to all be called the B&A law reports. Now they're moving away from that title a little bit, although you still see it like the Daily Labor Report. These are basically news centers for specific areas of law. The Bloomberg Law covers that are as good as it gets, right? So here we'll go into the Daily Labor Report, right? And typically practitioners will subscribe to a newsletter. So basically you're getting an email every day that has all the news stories that are going to be helpful, like if you're a labor practitioner, right? You can click them and read them to stay current. And news is just news on these particular topics, but again, it's not the New York Times. It is high-end legal news that's specific to Bloomberg that's not on West or Lexis. And then you have insights, and these are experts on these areas of law. We're not just talking about breaking news like a new tax regulation, right? It's a legal tax expert who's explaining its importance to you in plain English, which is also helpful, right, for a practitioner. These, I believe, are generally outsourced. Yeah, you're seeing third parties, like a capital management expert, who are writing these. And you can see insight, how litigation funders determine which legal matters to fund, granular legal updates. Any questions? All right, again, it's just a taste of what Bloomberg Law has to offer. It's just a taste of transactional resources. There's a lot out there, but we thought it would be helpful. Thanks.